thank you for joining me on Headstrong.
Hello, mate. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing, apart from a full stomach?
Yes, apart from the chicken palm that's sitting on me. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you, man. Yeah.
So, I wanted to kick this off because I interviewed Busted a couple of years ago, and they described being in a band as a dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that resonated with you or not, or how you would describe being in a band.
Less so the dysfunctional bit. Like, I think we were quite lucky in the band and still are that we get on very well and we're like best mates. But I think the family side of things is applicable because you end up being like brothers and you kind of take on roles, even subconsciously. It's like if, like James, I know you spoke to James like not too long ago, but he was like the oldest in the band and still like is the oldest, obviously. But he kind of took on the role of like, especially early on, he was a bit more of like the older brother figure. And,
Took on a bit of that responsibility.
Yeah, a little bit more, yeah. So I think you kind of slip into roles, especially early on in the band. But we never had too many like dysfunctional rows. We were quite good for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, absolutely, it's fair to say. What was your role then in that kind of, those early days of the band?
I don't really know. I remember like early on we had a tour manager and he used to like, there was Con who was the youngest who I think for a while everyone, especially when you were younger, felt he felt like a younger brother to all of us. And as you grow up, everyone kind of like levels out. But I think I'm probably like the middle child of the group, just trying to like keep everyone happy, keep going. That's kind of the role that I felt I took on.
I like that. You were a teenager when basically you had this huge global spotlight put on you, right? And that's crazy for anyone to experience. And, you know, we see this all the time. How did you enjoy, or what were those experiences like of literally enormous success, but what about the pressures put on your shoulders?
I mean, it was amazing. Yeah, like I look back at those times and I'm so grateful and they were so joyous as well. Like I feel so lucky to have had those moments. And yeah, you're a teenager, so there's a huge amount of pressure, but also you're just enjoying it. You're not like too stressed about anything. You're living out your dream. Like I wanted to be in a band from when I was 10 years old. So to get to play venues and write an album and go on tour and go to different countries and do it with your best mates was like everything that I wanted. Do you know what I mean? So I was really, really happy throughout a lot of it. I think there was certain things that I wasn't prepared for and I didn't really anticipate, and that is like the pressure. And I think coming from like quite a small town, I didn't love the like invasion of feeling like there was a side of my life that people wanted to know about. And I was like, well, I always tried to separate the two things. So it was like Brad who was in the band and toured and did all that, and then there was Brad who came home and just switched off and tried to like continually be the same lad that I've been when I was growing up. So that like for a long time was quite hard when there was pressure of people wanting to know more about the other side of you.
Did it ever get to a point of extreme overwhelm? Because it's, as you said there, like sometimes you actually just want to go home.
Yeah.
You want to make a cup of tea, sit around and have a natter. But there's also the other side of it of you've got to go to launches and you're opening to 20,000 people.
Yeah.
There's so much, you know, so much fear ultimately from what that personal to professional side is.
Yeah. I think there was a couple of moments, like definitely, again, like you're 18. I think like so I started the band, I joined the band when we were like I was 16. And the album came out, I just turned 18, but literally the week before the album came out. We started going, I think like 16 to 20 to 21 in like anyone's life. You're going through a huge amount of change anyway, like you're figuring out who you are, what you want to do, and like trying to start on a path that takes you through like your 20s and figure stuff out. So I think doing that amongst being away and busy, there was a couple of moments. There was like one time we were touring Australia and we were doing like Australia and Asia. I think we'd done the Asia run and then we were going to Australia, and at the end of the Asia run I was just absolutely wiped. I got tonsillised like 3 times in that year. So I was like, my physical health was really bad, but I think that was because my mental health was in quite a bad way, so I was just so wrung out. But yeah, I ended up just, I'd never cancelled a show, and I haven't cancelled a show in a long time, especially in the first like 10 years of the band. And it was like the first time that I'd ever been like, I can't physically do this show because my voice is gone. my head's wrecked. So I had to like fly home early, and I think that was purely because it was like the traveling into the shows, and there's a lot of the work that is very front facing, not even in terms of like interviews and shows, but like behind the scenes as well. Like you feel a responsibility to be up, and like as a singer and a performer, it's my job to bring joy to people and try and like spread a bit of that. So I think you feel that all the time, so you're on all the time. So I think that was getting to me a bit, and then that's the bit that took me a while to kind of figure out what I needed to be able to do that, but also do it consistently and not just burn out at certain points.
You mentioned earlier that you're kind of from a small town, so coming from that kind of Birmingham area, was mental health talked about growing up? What can you recall about mental health as a conversation in your childhood?
Not hugely, no. I don't think it was from memory, not hugely a big topic of conversation. But I was lucky that I grew up in a group of mates and in a family that were just very open. And like my family have always been hugely supportive and have like been a rock for me throughout all of it. And the same with my mates. There was never any animosity or kind of weirdness from my friends towards me when I started to get some success within the band. It was still very much like they treated me how they've always treated me. I'd go home and it was almost like we don't really want to hear about the music side of things. So I was like, I think very, very lucky that I had that support network around me growing up, and as well with the boys, like doing it in a band is amazing because you have three of the people who are going through the exact same thing as you. And even if you have people around you and your team, as much as they're in the trenches with you, no one can really relate to it in the same way as the other members of the band. And I've seen that more so now doing a solo project that there's a lot of support that comes through doing it with lads in a band. So I think it was very fortunate, but growing up it wasn't spoke about, but I think in hindsight it was a conscious thing. People were aware of like making sure that you were okay.
Do you remember when you first became aware of your own mental health?
Yeah, I think it was probably a year or two into the band, I'd say, like when we first started really touring, and I'd never really experienced like being overwhelmed. Like growing up in Birmingham, I wasn't too stressed. I was like quite a happy go lucky kid. And then the first like 2 years when it started to get really busy, I just started to struggle quite a bit in terms of being able to switch off and coping with the pressure and like knowing that you've got something that you love and you enjoy so much, but then at times being like, oh, this is really hard. It's quite a weird thing to get your head around when you're a bit younger because you're like, I should, in theory, be absolutely loving all of this. It's everything that I want, but there's still moments where I'm overwhelmed or unhappy within it. So I think I started doing, I must have been like 19, 20 then, and I started doing, there was an app called Headspace
Yeah.
that like I just started using, and it was like meditation. I think as much as I'm like, I love performing and being quite extroverted, I'm also very introverted in a lot of ways. So I was struggling to get that time for myself and like recharge my battery to be able to do this thing over here. So Headspace really gave me that. And that was the first time that I became aware of how linked my mental health was and what I needed to be able to do what I needed in the context of the band.
I know that I want to talk about it later, but you talk about it now, so it's because it's very interesting. When you are at that level of success and you've got ultimately thousands of people that are interested in you, there's a lot of filling up their cups, and you never have that opportunity to stop, pause. Like for me, I could go take a day off, but there must have been a period when you're touring or making music where you are doing something every single day and you don't get that opportunity to just pause, reflect, take a break, and spend time on your own and for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that was because we had such a big touring party as well. And you're right, like some people don't need it as well. Like some people are very like struggle being by themselves. Like I've got a couple of mates who are like, oh, I'm terrible, like spending 2 days by myself. I'd much rather like be around people, and that's what gives me that kind of relief. Whereas I'm a bit more like I'd need to every so often have a day or two just not seeing anyone. Like that's
Close the door. Yeah. I'm very
Phones
happy on
off.
my
Don't
own,
want to speak.
chucking on Netflix or leave the guitar,
Yeah.
but goodbye.
Yeah.
No, I totally relate. What about when you were younger then? Yes, music was a part of your life, but skateboarding.
Oh
Yeah,
dear.
yeah. I mean, I nearly brought it, but then I remembered I was going to a concert tonight and I would not have been allowed in. I've got an
You
electric
guys, it's
skateboard. I've got an electric
an
skateboard.
electric
Yeah.
one. Go
So
on.
I get around commuting on that sometimes.
So good.
It's really dangerous,
Yeah. But
but
what a rush.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah. Did
So
you
tell me,
skate growing up or anything?
no. I basically was just like, I remember everyone was going on electric scooters. Do you remember when that
Yeah.
was a thing? And I was just like, I can't be doing that. I'll just get an electric skateboard.
Yeah. Way
And,
better.
and my mum was like, "Have you ever skateboarded?" I was like, "Be all right." But skateboarding for
Safe.
you though, was that kind of your solace, a place of just completely switching off, much like if you were in the band, then that was your safe space and just with your mates having a great time.
Yeah.
Nothing else mattered.
Yeah, skate. I love skating, and I would have done that. I'd still do that now had it not been for like the head of the management company at the time, who was like an older guy, and me and James grew up BMX, and I grew up skating, and that's kind of like how we got on. Aside from music, early doors, we had that similarity. And we used to go out and skate. And there was one day where like I went out and then I broke my hand because I fell on my hand. And he was like, right, well, you obviously have to stop skateboarding because if you do that in the middle of the tour goes down. So I was like, oh, okay. But I loved it, man. Like, genuinely, I started skating when I was 12, 13. And I was doing music as well at the time, but it was just a complete switch off. And it was similar to guitar. Like, I love guitar because it was the process of hearing something, hearing a riff, an AC/DC riff, and being like, right, how do I learn how to play that? Going through the process of practicing every day, and then it's really fulfilling when you eventually learn it. And it was the same with skateboarding with tricks. And then there was also a really good community of people around it. Like, I think it's one of the best communities, similar to like growing up in a football club or just having like a bit of a team around you. Everyone's like, there's this one thing that if you're at a skate park, everyone will do. If you land a trick, and like everyone will have awareness of what people are trying to do in the park. And if someone like lands the trick, everyone would like hit their skateboards off the floor. And I was like, that's such a nice thing. So I loved it and I really miss it.
When it comes to skateboarding, but music, be that in a band and for yourself now as a solo artist, what does the word community mean to you?
I think it's like, I think it's people who share in the same passion as you. You both, and like everyone involved in it has maybe similar views or similar like goals that they want to pursue. I think that's what is like skating, football, music are amazing because everyone's kind of lifting each other up and or at least trying to. And you can kind of share knowledge on stuff. That's what a bit of a support network, I
Yeah,
would
for
say,
sure.
is what community is.
So when you were as a child, and I know that you have talked about this, but I want to hear it from you yourself. In terms of, do you remember that first time you were properly introduced to music, that earliest music memory in your childhood?
The first one that like made me want to do music, but my mom loves music, likes thinks she can sing, she can't, but God, like bless her, she will sing her heart out in the car, and that's like what my first memories of music were. I was listening to like Stevie Wonder in the car and Jamiroquai, and then she also listened to a lot of rock, so I got into like Led Zeppelin and AC/DC. And then I got, for one Christmas, I must have been like 10, I got an AC/DC live at Donington um, DVD, and I just sat and watched it, and it was Angus Young, and he had the like schoolboy outfit on. It must have been like 70,000, 100,000 people. And it just looked like I was just hooked because it was like Angus was such a showman. It was Brian Johnson who had the crowd in the palm of his hand. And I go back and I watch that video sometimes because there's like no phones out. And I think I connected with the band because I was like, it looks like the most fun with your mates. And then it also got me into the community music because I was like, being in that crowd just looks like the most freeing, like accepting place ever. And like everyone's just having the best time. So that was the thing that literally sparked me to properly start learning guitar and wanting to be in a band.
That's really cool. Let's fast forward though from singing in the car to now a solo album, which, by the way, and I know that you may have heard this already, The Panic Years is a very cool title.
Oh, thank
I
you.
really love it. I really love it. But can you describe what it means to you? Why did you fall upon the Panic Years? Well, not fall upon it, but
Yeah,
how did you come upon choosing this name? Because it's powerful and
yeah,
no doubt has a lot of meaning behind it.
yeah. And I think it, like, everyone's got a personal attachment to it as well. I think that's what I quite like, is it means certain things for me, but as soon as you bring it up and ask other people about theirs, then takes on an entirely different meaning. But I liked it because when I started writing the solo album, I didn't really know what I wanted to write about or what I wanted to sound like or any of those things, and it just kind of snowballed into feeling like a good opportunity to write about the past 10 years of my life, be that going through ups and downs in the band and like personal things that I haven't spoke about or kind of written about. So it ended up just becoming like a rounder for the past 10 years. And the Panic Years, I'd seen it a couple of times in reference to your 20s and about that feeling of not necessarily knowing where you're going or what you want to do and discovering who you are and feeling a bit panicked in that. But I kind of wanted my take on it is, as scary as panic is, and the word panic can instill it in itself. I think it's one of those words. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I think when I look back over the past 10 years and I look at those moments where I've been maybe a bit lost or a bit panicked or a bit worried about my future, on the other side of that was like where I learned the most about myself and yeah, there was lessons on the other side of it. So I think I want the album for fans or anyone who listens to it to be a bit of a reassurance that if you are in your panic years, be it your teens, your 20s, 30s, 40s, whenever, the other side of those are amazing because you discover so much about yourself.
Do you think you found writing this album therapeutic and kind of really reflecting on those past 10 years? Because as we suggested beforehand, it's very difficult to take a moment and reflect. And there's been highs, there's been lows, there's been breakups, there's been friendships. And actually, it was an opportunity to really look back at all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. It wasn't something that I'd like ever been very good at as well. Like I'd always just be like, that's happened, move on, that's happened, move on. But it was a nice opportunity to kind of look back on things and look at the negatives, look at the positives, and write about it. And I think it's like a chapter, and it helps me like really close a chapter on something when I write an album or a song. You go in, you delve into it, you see how you feel off the back of it, write the song, finish it, and then it's kind of done there. So it was a very like cathartic, therapeutic experience, definitely.
What were the biggest inspirations behind the album then? Because it's fair to say that the type of music that you've created is somewhat different to what has been previous. People would previously think of
Yeah.
you and the Vamps, but this is very much a different approach.
Yeah, slightly, I think. A lot of, like I said, like I grew up on a lot more rocky alternative music, and I love that, and I've listened to that like consistently throughout the past 10 years. So I kind of dived back into a lot of the music that I got into, which was like Queens of the Stone Age, the Black Keys. Like I grew up in a lot of Nirvana and that kind of like grungy alternative rock. So there was a lot of that influenced the sound, especially like Cry at the Moon, the first single. And it felt really natural as well. And I'd never written in that style within the band. So it felt nice to kind of dive back into like 14-year-old Brad and be like, what would he write now?
How are you feeling just before and then when you released that first single? Were you
Oh,
apprehensive, nervous, excited, an amalgamation of all of that?
yeah, bricking it. Yeah, 100%. Because it's so, again, when you're within the band, you're like shoulder to shoulder in it. Do you know what I mean? And you kind of go through all the ups and downs together. But it was my first time really experiencing that by myself, which is exactly what I wanted as well. Like I think this whole solo project has been an amazing experience because it's kind of made me look into different areas and how I deal with it and other parts of like music as a whole. So it's been like I've learned so much throughout it all. But yeah, pre first single, we did a run of shows at the 100 Club.
Yes.
Yeah, which was so fun, like really, really cool, great venue. But no one had heard any songs. Like on the first gig, I think the first single wasn't even out. So it was like going and playing songs that no one had heard. and again, like I haven't done that in 11 years. So it was nerve-wracking, but a nice challenge. Like it was nice to challenge myself.
A different
Yeah, exactly.
opportunity and experience for you. Now, something that no doubt takes place in anyone's panic years are breakups. What is your advice to dealing with those sort of emotions with breakups? Because it's so difficult to giving advice to then actually doing it. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. Oh, you can give the best advice. If only you could take your own advice. Do you know what I mean? Oh, I don't know. I think it's so cliche to say. I think time, genuinely.
It's true though. There's
Yeah,
a reason it's
yeah,
the old classic.
yeah. If you know that however long it'll be, time will get you past it. It's hard, and breakups are hard as well because it's like you're not just losing like the romantic side of things, you're also losing like a friend, and like I think
100%.
one of the hardest things is going from having the person that you text or like it's the little
It's the habit.
day-to-day things, it's the habitual stuff, yeah. So that's quite hard to get your head around. So I would say just lean on the people around you.
Find that support
Try and keep
network.
distracted where you can, and
Yeah.
then before you know it, you'll be like, okay, cool. I feel a bit more myself now.
And what's interesting as well in those panic years are breakups of friendships, because friends do come and go. There was a really lovely analogy that I saw on our wonderful app called TikTok. I don't know if you've heard of it. Yeah. And
No, I
you
haven't.
know, it's about people have imagine life or an individual as a tree. The roots are your support network of the tree, the people that are there all the time. There are the branches that blow in the wind. You don't know how much weight they can take. But then there's the leaves that come and go with the seasons. And friendships very much fits into all three of those. Have you had experiences with friends that have been, of course, you know, as we talked about your friendship group from home and you've known your whole life, but then people do just come and go, and breakups of friendships do happen as well?
Yeah.
What's your experience like with that, and how does that differ to romantic relationships?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities because again, it's like it's you have someone that you can like rely on and you trust, and losing that's quite hard. It's like there's a big space left. And I've only really experienced it once on like a friendship level, but then it like reconnected after a bit of time. But I think you can, if you know you can get past it and you can like talk things through after a certain amount of time, it's a testament to the friendship. And then I think the biggest thing I learned about that was understanding that everyone is like dealing with their own stuff and it'll come out in certain ways. So like, although there might be an argument about this thing, that's like the top layer. And when you get down to it, it's like, oh, that reaction, or that was because I was actually feeling this, or they were actually feeling that. So I think it taught me of being like, right, the importance of communication and understanding that the argument, be it in a romantic setting or a friendship one, is more often than not maybe triggered by something else. So in which it's so easy to like blow off about something in the heat of the moment, and then you might potentially lose a friendship that means a hell of a lot to you over something small. But yeah, it was like shit. You lose like a really good friend, and you lose someone that you care a lot about, and you lose that touchstone. I think is the biggest thing, and it's bit for me and for everyone. Like the fact that I'm away as much as I am, and there's a lot of work going on. I think your friends become, as you get older, like an extension of your family, and they, like you say, they can be your roots. So I think you got to nurture those relationships as much as you can.
100%. This album is a lot of personal experience. Do you think your ability to showcase vulnerability has improved as you've gotten older? Do you still get scared in showing vulnerability, or are you much more comfortable in that, you know, it's part of being who you are? Showing vulnerability is actually a strength.
I don't think I've ever been like hugely good at it. In like, I can do it under the guise of a song. Like that's easy because I can hide behind the song there. But I think in terms of that's the side of things I've always struggled with within music, is the fact that that is like something that is semi-expected. And I've understood that more as I've gotten older, because I think all of the artists that I grew up on and I love and am fans of now, there is a vulnerability in the music and then context to it outside of it. And it takes a lot. Like I see a lot of artists are very, very good at it. And it's like you being a bit of an open wound. But I think as hard as that is, again, you have a duty to the listener to like make them feel less alone through whatever it is, or make them feel happy, or whatever you're trying to convey. And I think being vulnerable outside of just music is as important as being vulnerable within your music. So I think slowly but surely, yeah, it's gotten a lot easier for me. But I used to just be like, just listen to the music. That's
Let
it.
it
Like,
do its
yeah,
talking.
yeah,
Sure.
that was all.
Well, it's a way that you express yourself, right?
Yeah.
Some people will be fantastic at articulating their emotions verbally. You're good at it, doing it with a musical instrument in your voice.
Yeah,
Like, you know,
well,
that's different. People have different ways of doing it. And now I know that this is maybe a very difficult question to ask then. Can you remember the last time that you cried and what it was about?
Oh, I watched the new Andrew Garfield Florence Pugh film. Oh, amazing, amazing film. Cried at that. Yeah, that was brutal. And she was amazing in that. And Andrew Garfield was, but she was amazing in that. Which was quite nice. I'm trying to think. Yeah, last time that like properly cried. I think the last night of the last Vamps tour, we all had a bit of a cry. Not like an out and out, like a bottom lip was going, but it was like, yeah, we were all very emotional.
Well, I mean, it's so difficult for someone like me to comprehend that because it's emotions of complete elation and joy as well,
Yeah.
and of success and what you've achieved. But then it's like, it's
The final,
over right
yeah,
now,
yeah, yeah. But
you know, the tour or
yeah,
whatever, you know, that's
that's
mad.
it. It's like the finality of just not the band, but like the tour coming to an end.
Just an emotional release.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
ultimately you've held that together for so long.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
So
What's
much-
one unforgettable story then from touring in your 20s? Something you haven't told. What's something that comes to mind? You go, yeah.
I remembered this the other day. I went on holiday to Bali recently, which was very fun. But the last time I was in Indonesia, we played there, and it was the first time it's the first time we'd ever played there. And we didn't really know much. We didn't know what to expect going into it, just in terms of like how the shows, so all of that stuff, because it was so far away for us. When we turned up and like got greeted by this like police escort, and then they like literally escorted us through Jakarta. We were playing, and we just hadn't realized that Jakarta had like really got on board with the band. And then it was just like the craziest trips, and we were like 19 at the time. And I remember just being like, "Oh yeah, police escort, this is sick." Yeah, it was great.
That's amazing. I love that. Touring, you're away for so long. Was there anything that you took with you or any non-negotiables on tour that, you know, you mentioned there meditating in the app, but was there anything else that kind of you took with you or that you did that really helped with your mental health and look after yourself on those on tours? And I'm sure that's also been an evolving process.
Yeah, it changes genuinely as you go through it. Like Headspace, honestly, for me was like for 2 3 years, I would try and do it like at least 4 or 5 times a week. And that was a non-negotiable because it was like getting time to myself, sorting my head out, made me approach like the day and the shows so much better. And then I got to a point where I was like, I feel like I needed it less and less. Actually, at the beginning of the solo stuff, it was the first time that I'd gotten back into like meditation and yoga, because it was again that same feeling, like starting something new and a whole load of new challenges around it. It was the first time I kind of felt like I felt at the beginning of the band in a long time, which was quite weird, like coming up to 30, being like, I thought I'd kind of moved past that. So I think keeping a constant bit of routine in terms of my own space, even an hour a day, or meditating or yoga or something that just, going into it, you're going to come out feeling better, something like the gym or, like I say, meditation. Like, as much as it might be a drag to do it at the beginning, you're going to feel 10 times better
It's
coming out
always
of
to
it.
think about the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. Like the gym, I'm always like, oh, can I be bothered to go? I'm like, you're going to feel better
Yeah,
coming out
it's
the back
so
of it.
true. What about homesickness? Did you experience that in any way, shape, or form? But at the very least, being away from home for so long, which you still do experience now, because there are these friends of yours that are, you know, still part of this group that still live at home, that are seeing each other every day, and you're probably in the WhatsApp groups,
Yeah,
and you're
seeing it
kind of
all.
like, I haven't been home for like 6 months.
Yeah, yeah.
Did that hit you?
Definitely. Like that, especially because I was going to everything up until like 16, 17. I was at all the like birthdays or the nights out or whatever it was. Well, not nights out when I was 16, because I still get ID'd now, so there's no chance I was going out at 16. But yeah, like the get-togethers, I remember, like you say, just seeing it and being like, oh, would have loved to go to that. But then I felt so lucky to have met
Awesome.
these lads in the band and my brothers and family that we are now. So it was just missing the kind of the calm. I missed the calm at home, I think, through how busy everything was with touring, but it just got easier. And again, you had to find it in a hotel room or
Yeah.
on a bus. Do you know what I mean? You had to try and replicate that feeling wherever you could.
Being in a band at that age, being on tour and having these amazing opportunities, there's also that kind of temptation of the party life, being in the public eye, pop star, enjoying your life. And when it comes to that, it's sort of like alcohol and that. What was your relationship like with that kind of party culture on tour? Did you know when to switch off, or was it still so exciting at those early days? Like, how did you find boundaries?
I think we like enjoyed ourselves. We made sure we enjoyed ourselves, but there was like boundaries kind of put for me anyway. Like I had to put boundaries in because there was a couple of times early on in the band where we'd go on nights out and then I'd have a gig the next day, and I was like, I'll be fine. Got to the gig and literally sounded like a dying cat. So I was like, I actually can't do this. I'm like, it's the first thing that goes is my voice. So early on, I got to the point where I was like, I need to plan my nights out, make sure I haven't got a gig the day after, all of those kind of things. But again, like, I think it's really easy if you feel a little bit lost to gravitate to the wrong things and gravitate to like groups of people who you're just trying to find like a bit of a home in it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas with the band, we felt very like we didn't really need anyone else. Like we were very happy just the four of us going out, and we'd go to events and just like it was our job to be at that event to like network, and we just stand in the corner and just get pissed by ourselves and then go home. So we were very happy with that, and even like now, I'm still kind of like that. I think there is always that world that you can step into, and it's like an open door. But it never hugely attracted me, to be honest.
This music industry has evolved dramatically, but the first thing is you recorded this album in New York. Did that impact the creative process at all? Because it's a city that never sleeps.
Yeah,
Was there was there burning candles? Did it impact the music itself? Like how did that help or hinder the process?
oh, I loved it, man. Like I've been to New York a few times, but I'd never written. I was there for like 2, 3 months last year, and stayed in a super buzzy part of town. Recorded in this place called Flux Studios, which is like Strokes did their first couple of albums there, and it like looks and smells like Strokes did the first two albums there. It's just like it's like a cigarette box of a studio, but it was great. It was so fun, and also there's such an he's so anonymous in New York, and I don't mean that even in terms of like if you are recognizable or whatever. It's just everyone is so dead set on doing what they're doing day to day that
Right.
you just kind of get swept up in it all, and that's really nice to feel like you're big, you're like tiny in the context of this huge city and everyone doing everything. It kind of, I think it instilled a lot of drive in me, whereas I wrote the beginnings of it at home, just at my house. But I think I started to kind of hit a wall where I was like, I need to be feel like I'm being pushed a bit more. And New York did that, so it helped the album massively.
The evolution of social media and notably TikTok has made the music industry evolve quite dramatically, as well as streaming services. But let's look at social media in particular. What are your thoughts and process of how that's changed and where it's going? Because sometimes there's one viral song on TikTok and
Mm.
that's
Yeah.
their life made almost. It's crazy the opportunity, don't get me wrong, the how many people there are, but the opportunity is still there. It's much easier than it is getting signed to a label and getting that exposure. What do you think of that kind of social media and TikTok opportunity?
Oh, I don't know. I think about it every day. Um, I think there's pros and cons to it. I think I love that any artist at any point in their career can have success on their own terms without like gatekeepers and being reliant on those, and I like how the power's been taken away from those kind of gatekeepers. if an artist is like creative and has good songs and knows how to push it through the TikTok or whatever platform it is, they can be completely in charge of their own like destiny on there. And I think that's really, really cool. And then you find people coming to them and then they're in the power position, which I think is really good for artists. And you see, like, yeah, I even noticed at the Grammys, someone said 50% of the nominees this year were independent artists.
What?
So outside of major labels, which is amazing. Do you know what I mean? I think labels are so can be amazing for you. I think it's all about going into things with your eyes wide open as to the benefits that you get from them, and you've got a structure around you, you've got a support network around you. They can help fund things, and that as an independent artist or starting up, it's very difficult to do those things. And if you've got a vision for, I want a music video like this, or I want my tour to look like this, it's very hard to do just off your own back. But there is a load of other options now, and I think that comes through things like TikTok and the power of being put in the artist's hands. So I think it's good. I think the downsides to it, again, there's a lot of pressure put on artists as to what falls under their scope of responsibility, in terms of you don't have to just be a singer or a songwriter. You've also got to be able to like produce, mix, understand the platform, be a content creator, come up with ideas. Like, that's a lot. And I think even the past 10 years of my career, I never had those responsibilities, and the band never had those responsibilities. Like, those were things that were outsourced or given. There was a member of the team who would help and stuff like that. Whereas everything gets put back to the artist now, because people on TikTok search for authenticity and see the real version of the artist, which is very hard for someone else to come and bring out of them. So it does fall on the artist, but it's a lot of pressure for especially young artists coming through.
How do you approach social media then as an individual, not as a musician, when it comes to kind of looking after your mental health? Because you can get so lost in doom scrolling. What's your relationship with social media like?
Fine. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. I've never like loved it.
Yeah.
I've never loved it. I like recipes. It gives
Love
me
it.
some good recipes, and then also like videos of dogs as well. Do you know what I mean?
Great. Two top tier things.
That's my algorithm, really.
Okay, this wasn't in the question brief, but I want to ask. Go on. If someone's coming over, what's your go-to impressing meal? What are you doing?
Okay, I've got one that I've been doing. I've maybe done it like 6 times in the past 6 months. It's an andouille pasta with a burrata on the top, and then a like ginger honey glaze on top.
Oh, I love that.
But like, I've got it down now. Do you know what I mean? I could never follow recipes. I don't know if you're good at following recipes or not.
No.
But I would. I'd like be following it, and then halfway through be like, nah, I'll throw a bit of
always
dill in there. That'd be
freestyle.
nice. And then you get to the end and it tastes like
Yes.
terrible.
Yeah. No, literally, it's so true. Now, you're turning 30 in July. Sorry to remind you.
Thank you for that. Cheers.
What is the biggest takeaway from your panic years then? What is that lesson that you've taken away?
I think not to overthink would be my biggest thing for me, because I think you can get I'm like naturally quite an overthinker, and I think looking back over the past 10 years, there's been moments where I'm like, you shouldn't have overthought that. And someone said it to me the other day, and it was like such a simple phrase, but I was worrying about something, and he was just like, it's not that deep. And I think that like mantra of saying to yourself, like, there's some things that warrant overthinking and worrying about, but it's weighing that up and the impact that it has on you, hours that you spend agonising over something. So taking into my 30s, no overthinking, some overthinking where it's necessary, but 9 times out of 10, chill out.
Before we conclude, the music industry and mental health, there is a very interesting relationship there. Do you think enough is being done to support specifically young artists when it comes to mental health support?
I don't think so, not particularly, if I'm being honest. I'm like very fortunate that, I mean, yeah, I'm not a young artist anymore. I'm 29, 30, but I think growing up there wasn't as much of a conversation then. I think it's now becoming more of a conversation, but I still don't necessarily. I think it needs to be like inbuilt.
What do you think can be done to help support that from an infrastructural level? Be that
Yeah.
from labels or on tours? Is there something that, or any ideas that come to mind that you go, yeah, that would have been really helpful if I was on tour? Like I would have benefited from that.
Yeah, I think like therapy, 100% should be kind of built in an early part of the process for artists, so that they've got an outlet, a completely non-biased, safe outlet to speak to, and then they've also got like they can touch base with them. So if you've got someone who they've been having conversations with from early on throughout the process, they can kind of check back in as to where they're at. I think time and like schedule management. I just see so many artists just get wrung out and just burnt out because their diaries are just packed full. I think the importance of time needs to be like highlighted.
Time off.
Time off, even just a day or two, and just like factoring that into young artists' careers. But I think, yeah, therapy and having that like built into young artists' careers, so that because there's so much stuff that you're trying to get your head around as like a teenager going into a young adult anyway. That in the context of having to be an artist, manage your content, be worrying about the numbers, there's so much comparison. There's like so many things that bounce around your head that you need to have someone to help you kind of understand those thoughts.
I think that's very, very sound. Right, final 2 questions for you. First one is, what artist, dead or alive, is on the #1 collab list for you?
Ooh, collab list. Oh, like I said, I was a massive Nirvana fan. Like, not even collaboration. I would love to see Nirvana.
Yeah.
That would just be in the crowd. That would be on there. And then collab. I'm trying to think. I'd always want to work with someone who comes from like a different perspective to me, because I think it's interesting.
Okay.
I think like Pharrell's genius at working with artists from like loads of different genres and maintaining his identity but bringing a different side out to them. So I think it'd be really interesting to work with Pharrell.
Love
be
that.
amazing.
My final question that I ask every guest, what does the word headstrong mean to you?
Ooh. Maybe, I think fortitude and like having the ability and the like mental strength to kind of deal with what the world throws at you, and that being headstrong, I think, is like understanding what you need to be in a position where you can deal with those things, and be that understanding that you need time over here to be strong enough to deal with it. You need conversations with people. Maybe you do need your work, whatever it is. But I think getting yourself to a position where you can have some like stability, because it fluctuates all the time. So you're trying to find a constant or like your baseline. And I think that's being headstrong, is like finding your baseline and having like emotional fortitude, because there's always stuff coming at you.
I love the word fortitude. It's a very underused word.
It's a good word.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
for
mate.
coming on.
I
Really
really
appreciate it. The Panic Years is out on February the 28th, so go check it out. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you,
on.
pal. Pleasure.
Nice. There we go.